How are we doing, ladies and gentlemen? We are nearly 1 month away from the start of the preseason. The Bulls play their first preseason game on October 8th against the Milwaukee Bucks. We've got training camp in just a few weeks, and I honestly cannot be more excited for the start of the NBA season. I know a lot of Bulls fans aren't, but there are so many uncertainties going on into this season that it kind of makes the season that much more intriguing for me. It can either go really well, or it could turn out to be really bad. But either way, things have been really slow on the news front as it relates to the Bulls anyway. Not really a lot going on ever since the Lonzo ball back and forth with Stephen A. Smith. The Bulls roster for the most part is set. No extensions for guys like DeMar DeRozan or Patrick Williams yet anyway. So because of that, I thought it's a good time to do another hot takes video. For my OG subscribers and viewers, you know I used to do this every Wednesday like clockwork back in the day, but have since started paring those back. But they are some of my favorite videos to make where I get to bring you guys into the fold, and it's great to see where your heads are at with this team, giving the hottest of the hottest takes, and it's what we'll be talking about in this video. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Real quick, before I get into the takes, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe if you're needing a good place to help follow the Bulls, as I'll be covering this team all season long, and we've got a great community of people here, whether you're a diehard fan or you're just a passive fan who enjoys the game. But anyway, let's get into some of these takes. And our first one comes to us from the Benny. If the Bulls are not a top 6 seed in the East by the trade deadline, DeRozan will be traded so we don't lose him for nothing. I wouldn't say that this is that hot of a take, because if the Bulls are falling below expectations, yeah, they're going to look to make some big trades. And that probably starts with DeRozan, who is on an expiring deal. Still has value for a contending team anyway, and that can help kickstart a reboot of this team. What I do think makes this a little hot, as you mentioned, top 6, because if the Bulls are, say, below 10th in the East by the trade deadline, nothing's going right, you're seeing the same issues as last year or even worse, yeah, they're going to trade him, no question. But if they're the 7 or 8 seed, and the teams in the top 8 are fairly close together in terms of the standings, we know this front office, and they're going to cling on to the hope that this team can do something in that instance. I don't think that they would actually trade him, even if they are not in the top 6. Now, there was a comment within this take where Boko Lupo said the Bulls will trade Lonzo Ball and a first-round pick to get out of dealing with him. Well, the problem with this take is that it actually would make absolutely no sense for the Bulls to do this, whether they traded him this season or next offseason if he's still not healthy. The Bulls would never give up a first-round pick just to get Lonzo off of the books, when one, they already got money back on their books for him by applying for the disabled player exception this season. Not that they're going to use that, because we know that they would have to go into luxury tax to use it, which isn't going to happen. But the point is, it's there, which means Lonzo's salary is only impacting their books in the sense for next season. And then say next season Lonzo still isn't getting any better, it's becoming more clear that he might never play again, they would then have the ability to apply for the career-ending injury exception or medical retirement of a player, whatever it's called, where you would be able to get all of Lonzo's salary for that last year off of their books. Lonzo would still get his money because it's a guaranteed contract, but his pay would not impact their cap sheet. So they have outs as it relates to Lonzo's deal and his current contract. Why would they throw in a first-round pick just to get him off the team when they could do that for nothing next season, especially when the Bulls are going to need all of the first-round picks they can get after they traded 3 first-round picks to bring in both Vucevic and DeMar DeRozan. Next, we've got upset Bulls. Paul George will be a Bull in place of DeRozan by next season. Interesting. I was not expecting to see a Paul George to the Bulls take in this one. Not really sure how I see it happening or why it would make sense for either team, really, both for the Bulls and Clippers. I mean, Paul George still has another year left on his deal after the season, but it is a player option, which he could decline to become an unrestricted free agent next summer, which would also be the case with DeMar if the Bulls don't extend him or trade him beforehand. So in theory, both could be free agents in the summer of 2024. And while I think overall Paul George is probably the better player, just simply because he's a much better player defensively than DeMar is, and he's a much better three-point shooter, but DeMar is much more durable than Paul George is, which is saying something when you talk about availability being everything in the NBA and the fact that they're the same age. And if I'm going to bank on a player being healthier in their mid-30s, it's DeMar over Paul George. But when healthy, I do think PG has the edge over DeMar. But even assuming health isn't an issue, I don't see a world in which adding Paul George in place of DeMar makes sense for the Bulls if things aren't working out this season and they're needing to pivot in a different direction. By next season, Paul George is going to be 35. I don't know how that makes you much better for the long term, and because it's Paul George, he's still going to command a lot of money, probably near max level contract, which, as the Bulls stand, even if DeMar walks and they get his salary off the books, they're not going to be able to afford signing Paul George outright as a free agent. So it's an interesting take, but I don't see it being very plausible. Next up, we've got the Jude 23. Julian Phillips will outshine and ultimately earn more minutes this season than Dalen Terry. I mean, I could see it happening really because of positioning. The Bulls don't really have much depth in the front court, and there could be a situation in which one of their front court players gets injured, has to miss a few games, and Phillips gets more playing time as a result of it. Dalen Terry, even if some of the backcourt players get injured, he still likely isn't going to crack the rotation. There are just too many guards for Terry to really get much run outside of garbage time. And with Phillips being a strong defender and the Bulls needing rim protection, yeah, I could see him earning more minutes. I don't know if I would say he would outshine Dalen Terry because I think both are rarely going to see the floor next season. But yeah, Phillips is likely going to get more exposure because he's a big man. Next, we've got YRLNZ. Alex Caruso leaves the Bulls for another team to get a bigger role and to compete for a title. Well, are you saying leave in a couple of years because he's under contract with the Bulls for the next 2 seasons with no player option? That would be the earliest he can, quote, leave the team. Now, if you're saying maybe he demands a trade so he can leave earlier, then sure, but is Alex Caruso really the kind of player that has the leverage and ability to make demands for a trade in the NBA? I don't know. I don't think so. Now, his trade value, because he's on a team-friendly deal, he's one of the best defenders in the league, first team all defense, very smart, savvy player, his trade value is going to be high. And maybe if the Bulls do in fact go on a fire sale like we were talking about, then sure, he could be moved and the Bulls try and find the right destination for him to compete for a title in a prominent role. But also on that point, you're talking about Caruso leaving for a bigger role. His role in the Bulls is pretty substantial. I mean, the Bulls rely on him greatly for his defense. He started 36 games last season. He averaged over 23 minutes per game, usually closed out games in the clutch. I mean, his role is pretty defined in Chicago. I don't see where he could go to another team and have a bigger role, especially if it's on a contending team that already has star players. Next, we've got Poke Joe. Zach Lavine should run point guard. Put the ball in your max players' hands. DeMar at the 2, Pete Will at the 3, Craig at the 4, and Vuce at the 5. Gives us very solid defense and will allow Pat to be up top more for catch and shoot threes than being down low on the block. It's interesting. I don't hate it. I actually think shaking things up a bit like this with the lineup should be experimented on for the Bulls this season. Honestly, I think the only area that I disagree with is Zach playing point. Don't get me wrong, Zach is a decent playmaker. If I'm not mistaken, he actually was a point guard in high school and college, so we know he can play it and has even played point at various times in his career throughout the NBA. I think the only thing I hesitate with this is the Bulls need a smart, savvy, pass-first point guard. And that's not Zach Lavine, let's be honest. I'm fine with DeMar playing the 2 because that's what he played most of his career until he went to San Antonio. Patrick Williams, we know he can play the 3. It's the position he played for most of his rookie season and did it well as a rookie. Craig, we know he's a capable power forward, and then of course Vuce at center. Like, I don't mind all of these other roles, and the balance between offense and defense is there, but I would rather have a pass-first point guard running the floor, being that floor general. I don't see that coming from Zach Lavine. And then also, the Bulls' backcourt defense would be pretty bad instead of going with someone like Jevon Carter at point. Next, we've got Sony Badger 12. If Pat takes a leap we believe he can reach, Bulls make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. I mean, what kind of leap are we talking about here? Are we talking a leap of all of a sudden becoming an all-star? Because that's the kind of leap the Bulls would need to see from him in order for them to go to the conference finals. Not only that, but everything else would have to go right with Zach, DeMar, Vuce, all of them staying healthy and still playing at a high level. If we're just talking like a leap in the sense that he clearly improves, maybe starts averaging 14 to 15 points per game and elevates his defense a bit more, yeah, that's not going to be enough to get the Bulls to the conference finals. There's just too much competition and better teams out there that are in front of the Bulls in the Eastern Conference. Next, we've got Big Muss. Zach will be All-NBA next season. All-NBA is a hard thing to do, my man. Not saying it can't happen because we've seen Zach play at an All-NBA level the season before they brought in Lonzo and DeMar, and Zach got his first All-Star appearance, nearly reached the 50-40-90 club, but the Bulls weren't good. They didn't make the play-in, and team performance does impact one's All-NBA candidacy as well as the players and the supporting cast they have around him. And yes, Zach was on his way to potentially becoming All-NBA before he got injured halfway through the 21-22 season, and everything in general kind of fell off for the Bulls from there. But for this upcoming season, Really, you're going to have to see a perfect version of Zach Lavine combined with the Bulls being a top 6 team in the East and him taking more of a primary role over DeMar DeRozan, because it's going to be hard to justify voting Zach Lavine as an All-NBA player when DeMar is still being viewed or perceived as the team's best player and primary option. I would love to see it happen, of course, because Zach Lavine playing at an All-NBA level is good news for the Bulls in terms of their overall success if that happens. Anyway, guys, I'm going to end it there for this edition of your Bulls Hot Takes. Keep the takes coming as always, and be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.